Ashkelon will see and be afraid.
Okay, wait a minute. Ashkelon. I know where Ashkelon is.
Yeah.
I've been to Israel. It's in Israel, right?
It's in southern Israel. Yeah.
So tell me about the history of Ashkelon.
So there were 5 Canaanite cities, and this brings us to the Palestine prophecy, right? This part of the prophecy is about the Philistines. But here it only says Ashkelon. It doesn't say anything about the Philistines.
Okay, why do we say Philistines and Palestinians? Are we talking?
Well, let's save that. Let's talk about the historical Philistines.
Okay, the historical.
So the historical Philistines, before we get to the Palestinians of today, the historical Philistines had what's called a pentapolis, or there were 5 city-states, and each one of those city-states was like a little kingdom. And the 5 city-states were, and they were all in the southwestern area of Israel in the coastal region, Ashkelon, Gaza or Aza, Ekron, Gat, and Ashdod. And the most famous Philistine, of course, is Goliath, who's called Goliath Hagiti, the Gittite, right? So he's from Gat. That's what he means. He's a Gittite.
Okay.
We have Achish, the king of Gat, who David is living with.
Oh, right. When he was pretending to be crazy.
Yeah. You have so we have different Philistines who are mentioned in the Tanakh. And then David has this group of Philistines who are his loyal allies, who are his fierce warriors, his 2 bands of Philistines, who are called the Creti and the Pleti. And that's really interesting because Creti means the Cretans. And Pleti is the Pletans. Now, what are the Pletans? I don't know. But the Cretans were from Crete. And that's a bit strange because the Philistines, you would have this pentapolis of 5 cities.
Yeah.
But some of them are from Crete. And then they have kind of strange names. You know, the Canaanites, remember I told you, spoke a language very similar to Hebrew? So much so that if I wrote it out with vowels in Hebrew letters, a lot of Israelis could read it. I could say 20 years ago that most Israeli high school kids could read it, but I think that's not the case anymore. Their education isn't as classical as it used to be. But it's very similar to Hebrew. The Philistine language is completely different. When we look at a name like Goliath, which is Goliath, that doesn't even sound like a Semitic name. And then you have Achish. That's also not a Semitic name. Both of those names are in what are called Indo-European languages. They have the case endings that you would find in Greek. So in Greek, a lot of words end in us, and that's what's called a case, like Zeus, right? Zeus is Zeus. So it seems from what we know of the Philistine names that they were an Indo-European people. And some of them apparently came from Crete because they're called the Cretans. And Ashkelon's an interesting name. Some historians say Ashkelon refers to the place where the people who settled in Ashkelon came from. And that place was called something like Shakala. And they say, oh, that's Sicily, Sicilia.
Oh.
So they were invaders from Sicily. And the word Philistine itself, Plishtim, are you ready for, before we get to what Philistine means. So there were these 5 cities, and we can see that in the story of the ark. Remember, they returned the ark, and they had these plagues that happened.
Right.
And so they sent back 5 golden, it says, what does it say in the English? It's like 5 golden hemorrhoids, I think it says. But they weren't hemorrhoids. They were the boils of the Black Plague. And how do we know that? Because it says there was a plague there in the different Philistine cities that the ark went.
Oh, right.
And what kind of plague was it? Well, we can see from the story, they sent 5 golden mice. So they saw mice dying, and they thought the mice are giving them the plague. And that's the Black Plague, right? What in the Middle Ages was called the Black Plague, or some form of the Black Plague. They associated with mice because what happens, we think today, or we know today, I should say, not sure which one, the fleas bite the mice die, then the fleas go looking for something else to bite, and they bite people. And people see dead mice, and they associate the plague with, they think the mice gave it to them, or the rats. So they send 5 golden mice, 1 for each of the 5 Philistine cities, Ashkelon, Aza, Ekron, Gat, and Ashdod. And then they have 5 golden boils of the Black Plague, 1 for each of the 5 cities. So these 5 cities were called Plishtim, Philistines, and the Plishtim come from the Hebrew word palash, which means invader. So Philistine literally comes from the word that means invader. And actually, the literal meaning of palash is to penetrate. And we looked this up in the dictionaries. It's really a beautiful illustration of linguistically of what it means. So it talks about an etrog, that's a citron.
Right.
And a citron that is pierced but not fully penetrated to where the hole reaches the inside of the flesh of the citron. Citron's like a giant
It's
lemon.
a fruit.
Right. It's a type of lemon, sort of. Well, it's related to the lemon.
It smells amazing.
It doesn't taste too good, but it smells
tastes
really
very good if you candy it.
Yeah, sure, if you candy it. But anyway, so the word for to fully penetrate is palash. And palash means an invader. So the Philistine were the invaders. Now, why were they called invaders? Because they invaded from the west. And they're referred to and also visually presented and shown in Egyptian sources. So the Egyptians show them, they call them the sea peoples in the Egyptian sources. And why are they called the sea peoples? Because they invaded Egypt from the sea. And they come into Egypt and they fight against the Egyptians. And they're shown with this certain type of hat that has these feathers. The feathered hat. And we see those feathered hats when we excavate archaeology in the area around Gaza, in the Philistine sites. We see that they have sarcophagi that is sort of coffins made of clay. And the clay coffins, you can see them in the Israel Museum, at least as of recently. They may move them. But you walk into the Israel Museum to the archaeology section, you see these Philistine coffins made of clay, and they have the sea people's hat that we know from the Egyptian drawings. And so the conclusion archaeologists made is that the Philistines are sea peoples who invaded from the Mediterranean. Some of them apparently came from Sicily. Some of them came from the Aegean, like Crete. Crete is part of the Aegean, the Greek area. And what happened is there was this is what they believe happened. We don't know for sure exactly why it happened, but the explanation of archaeologists is that there was a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini, also known as Terra. Right. And most of the island exploded, and it caused, number one, ash, but also ash in the sky that caused all kinds of
things to die when it does that.
It caused all kinds of climatic problems. Right. So all of a sudden you didn't have, you would lose summer.
That's what I'm saying.
And you'd have a very cold winter.
Yes, exactly.
And crops fail.
Right.
And there's a tidal wave, and it causes the collapse of what's known as the Minoan civilization. In archaeology, it's called the Minoan civilization. Okay. And that leads to all these people who are then, my island was destroyed. Now I'm looking for a place to settle. And I drive out the people from Crete. And the people from Crete are looking for a place to settle, and they invade Egypt and southern Israel. And that's where the Philistine invaders, right? The Canaanites apparently called them invaders before the Israelites, because they had invaded from the west, from the Mediterranean. The Egyptians called them sea peoples. So the Philistines are invaders, not native to the land of Israel. And that's why they have these Indo-European names.